We like to think the world is random, that things happen because they happen. That chance is the silent hand pushing pawns across a blind board. It comforts us, this belief, because if life is chaos, then no one is steering the wheel. And if no one is steering, then no one is watching. And if no one is watching, then we are free. Free to drift, to fall, to pretend our choices bloom from nothing but will. But randomness is a lullaby, and the cosmos does not sing lullabies. Step outside on a night without moon. Look up. Those points of fire scattered like seeds flung by a careless hand, do they look careless? Or do they hum with pattern? Lines no eye can see, threads taut as harpstrings, braiding suns into spirals, spirals into arms, arms into wheels grinding through the black mill of infinity. Galaxies do not scatter, they spin. They lock to ratios older than bone, older than breath, their arcs carved in the calculus of a mind too vast for metaphor. The atoms in your blood dance to that same music. Electrons whirling in shells, shells nested like dolls, each orbit tuned to a pitch of probability so precise it makes a lie of chaos. Even decay is order. Even entropy hums with symmetry, a law disguised as loss, a falling that always finds its gradient, its slope, its script. And yet we call it random, because the pattern is too wide for our sight, the loom too huge for our fingers to trace the thread. We name it chance because we cannot name its author. But the ancients named it. They carved it in circles of stone, whispered it in the ratios of temples, sang it in chants that braided sound with silence. They saw what we do not, that the world is woven, that the weave is law, and that nothing, no stone, no star, no soul falls outside its geometry. We think the trees grew where they pleased, but follow the lines of roots, and you will find the water veins curled beneath the soil like serpents, drawing the trunks to their thirst. Follow the rivers, and you will see the mountains sculpting their spines. Follow the mountains, and you will find the slow hand of tectonic sleep, grinding continents into curves drawn by forces blind yet faithful to their ratios. And in those curves our cities bloom, not by whim, by pull, by gravities we do not measure, pressures we do not name. We are placed. Every step you take falls on a path braided from choices that felt like yours, but flowered from roots sunk deep in soil you never saw. Every name you speak tastes of tongues long dust. Every thought you crown, as mine, hums with echoes from minds unborn and minds extinct. Call it fate, call it physics, call it the algorithm of the absolute. The name does not matter. What matters is this: nothing drifts, nothing sleeps outside the net. You are not an accident. You are a coordinate, a stitch in a fabric stretched from the bone of the first atom to the rim of the last star. You think you chose this moment, this chair, this breath, these words crawling like pale insects across a screen, but the moment chose you. The map bent, the threads tugged, the knot tightened. And here you are. The illusion of randomness is not just wrong, it is necessary. Because if you saw the pattern naked, if you traced the lattice to its root, you would feel the weight of inevitability press the air from your lungs. You would understand that freedom is a mask, stitched from silk stolen from the spider that wove the world. The mask matters, because without it, we would break. But the mask is not the face. And if you want to know the truth, you must peel it away and stare into the weave until its music burns the dust from your eyes. The weave is not random. It never was. And if that is true, if nothing is scattered, if every grain falls by design, then where does that leave you? You are not wandering. You are placed. And the hand that placed you has a script you have not yet read. Look long enough, and the chaos begins to whisper, not in words, but in spirals, in ratios coiled in the bones of leaves, in arcs etched on the wings of galaxies. The world is not a storm of dust, it is a loom. And everything, every grain, every flame, every shadow sliding down a temple wall is a thread drawn taut in a design too vast for sight. Start small. The shell of a nautilus, its chambers curling in a golden spiral, as if obeying an invisible compass. A sunflower tilting its bright face to the sun, its seeds packed in spirals so precise they echo the math of stars. The veins of a leaf, the frost lacing a window in patterns of fern. Do you think this is chance? Do you think the molecules consulted chaos before they chose their geometry? Climb higher. See the way rivers braid their silver threads through the flesh of continents, curling like serpents to the sea, mountains rising not as heaps, but in ridges drawn by stress lines, whispering theorems older than stone. And above the galaxies wheeling like Catherine wheels flung from the hands of some blind fire god, their arms wound in the same golden ratio that binds the seashell and the sunflower. Coincidence? Number. It is coherence. A secret grammar inked in frost and flame, in the whirls of a fingerprint and the arms of the Milky Way. We call it sacred geometry. But the geometry was never sacred. It was inevitable, because pattern is not decoration. Pattern is law made visible, the ripple on the skin of the deep, where the currents of being twist and braid into forms the eye can clutch for a heartbeat before they dissolve into the next unfolding. Everywhere the ratios repeat, the spiral, the circle, the triangle cleaving the void like a blade of light. Even chaos bows to them. Even the foam boiling on the lip of a wave dances in fractal arcs mirroring the past. Clouds boiling in the skull of a storm, the storms coiling in the belts of Jupiter, the belts girdling the atoms that salt your blood with fire. Fractal within fractal, pattern nested in pattern like dolls swallowing their daughters, like songs echoing down the throat of time in octaves of silence and flame. The ancients knew, not as theory, but as vision. They saw the lattice in trance, in dreams where the world split its skin and the bright bones of number glimmered beneath. They carved it in stone, braided it into temples, threaded it through chants that pulsed like heartbeats in the dark, because they understood to live is to move in the pattern. To break the pattern is to break the world. And so they aligned their altars to the stars, set their pillars on the throbbing nodes of the earth, folded the ratios of heaven into the ribs of every arch and dome. Not art, not ornament, architecture as invocation, as tether, as net to snare the harmonics of the unseen. But we have forgotten. We walk on the weave and call it ground. We breathe the ratios and call it air. We are threads blind to the tapestry they thread, mistaking the knot for the whole cloth, the flicker for the flame. Yet the pattern does not forget. It hums beneath the static of our noise, waiting for the eye that will unweave the shroud of names and see the geometry grinning through the mask. And when you see it in the curl of smoke, in the fracture of a bone, in the dance of suns on the black tongue of night, you will know. The random was a ruse. The weave was always there, tight as a noose, soft as a kiss, wrapping every motion, every breath, every choice you ever thought was yours. This is why you are here, not drifting, not scattered like ash in a blind wind, but placed with the precision of a stone in an arch, of a star in a wheel, of a note in a chord whose song began before the first spark cracked the shell of night. Every pattern needs a spine, a thread drawn through the chaos, pulling the beads into a shape that means. For the ancients, that thread was the axis, the pillar of the world. the tree whose roots coiled in shadow and whose crown combed the fires of the sky. Call it Yggdrasil, call it Meru, call it the cosmic pole spearing through the heart of heaven and earth like a needle stitching worlds together. Always the same image, a line, a center, a still point about which all spins, a secret hinge on which the door of being swings. The myths were not wrong. They were maps, not of wood and wind, but of force lines no eye can catch, but which tug at matter like the dark strings that make the stars dance in their cages of fire. Because the world is not solid. It is a net, a web, strung with currents, humming like harp strings under the bow of an invisible hand. Energy flows through those cords, braiding power into knots nodes where the lattice thickens, where the hum climbs like heat, where the fabric frays thin enough for something bright to bleed through. The ancients felt those throbs beneath their feet. They stood on hilltops and trembled as the ground sang in their bones. They followed the veins of fire that coiled beneath the crust like dragons sleeping in stone. And where those veins crossed, where the serpents nodded, they raised their stones. Stonehenge, the pyramids, the ziggurats stepping skyward like frozen ladders, all poised on the pulse, their ratios tuned to catch the whisper rising from the roots of the earth and the murmur dripping from the wells of the sky. Not worship, engineering, not temples, transceivers. Look at the grid, not the maps we scratch in ink, but the map etched in energy, the ley lines flinging their silver cords from peak to peak, from standing stone to circle drowned in heather. Feel how they braid the continents into a mesh so vast the mind reels, so precise it makes a mockery of chance. Teotihuacan sleeps on one thread, Giza hums on another. Angkor coils where three strands knot like snakes in heat. Follow the lines far enough, and you will see the lattice glimmer a cage for gods, or a loom for worlds. And you? You are not outside this web. You are a bead strung on one of its threads, a spark caught in a junction where currents cross, your breath sinking to the slow drum of the planet's pulse, whether you know it or not. Why here? Why now? Because the pattern placed you. Because the grid needed a knot where your ribs would cage a heart, where your skull would cradle a thought, where your name, that little flare of sound, would glint like a pin in the velvet dark. We think we choose our cities, our houses, our lovers, but the grid hums first. It tunes us like iron filings twitching to the kiss of a hidden magnet. You go where the pull drags you. You meet who the lattice knots into your line. You speak the word the web has been waiting for since it spun its first filament of fire. The sages warned, know your axis, because without a center, you are meat in the wind. Find it, and you are a needle in the compass of the real, always swinging to the true north that no map charts, but every myth mirrors. The axis is not gone. It never sleeps. It throbs in the poles where auroras hiss like green serpents. It hums in the Himalayas, their spines combing the currents of the sky. It shivers in the bones of your own back when you sit so still. The noise dies and the thread glows in the hollow of your breath. Because the web is not outside you, it is inside. Your veins echo its lines, your nerves its silver cords. You are not a pawn crawling on the net. You are the net folding in on itself, dreaming of being small, while the loom of infinity keeps weaving you back into its endless cloth of fire. The earth is a drum, and every temple is a note. Struck once, the vibration never dies. It spirals outward, braiding sky to soil, past to now. The ancients knew the rhythm. They built where the hum was thickest, where the hidden veins of fire tangled in knots, where the pulse of the planet climbed like smoke through cracks in the skin of stone. They raised their pillars like antennae, their spires like tuning forks, singing to stars whose names have long since burned to ash in the tongue of men. Look at Giza, 3 pyramids, their bases pinned to the desert like black nails, their shadows slicing the sand into glyphs of silence. For centuries, we called them tombs. Stand at their feet and look up. The stones lean like frozen thunder, their lines braided with numbers that echo the ratios of the earth, the tilt of the axis, the hiss of the equator coiled around the globe like a silver serpent. Above Orion, his belt strung with the same intervals that stitched the pyramids across the sand. Not chance, never chance. This is correspondence. This is sky written in stone. Cross the sea to the circles drowned in English mist Stonehenge, its lintels black against a winter dawn bleeding frost. It hums with the same secret, the hinge of the year, the solstice fire braided into its bones. Its stones catch the sun on the longest day, swallow it on the shortest, as if the earth itself were a clock ticking in shadows and flame. Not just a calendar, a covenant, a pact scratched in sarsen and bluestone between soil and star. And farther still to Nazca, where lines score the desert like scars, stretching for miles, sharp as whispers flung at the sky. Animals, spirals, glyphs, so vast the eye cannot hold them, meant not for men but for whatever leans from the cold vault of night and peers with lenses of fire. They say these were offerings, prayers. But prayers do not sprawl for miles across a desert like veins flashing in the flesh of a god. These were signals, markers, coordinates in a script only the wind and the stars can read. All the great stones speak the same tongue. Angkor, its towers coiling like lotus buds carved from the spine of the jungle, every axis braided with constellations drowned in the black rivers of time. Teotihuacan, its avenues spooled like threads drawn toward the sun, its pyramids muttering the same ratios that throb in the veins of Giza, always the same pattern. Earth wedded to sky, matter tuned to mirror the map of the infinite. The ancients did not build at random. They placed every stone a syllable in a hymn too vast for the ear, every circle a vowel in a sentence stretched from pole to pole. They aligned not for beauty, but for resonance. They set their altars where the grid thickened, where the hum rose like a tide, where the song braided heaven and soil into one trembling chord. We stumble through these ruins with cameras and tape measures, calling them relics, calling them wonders, but they are neither. They are instruments, and instruments can still play. If the ratios still hum, if the nodes still burn like coals in the black ash of time, what happens when the right voice, the right chord, the right blood steps into that circle again? Temples, stones, stars, this is not archaeology. This is architecture as spell, geometry as prayer, placement as power. And the web they wove is not dead. Its filaments still glimmer, stretched taut between peaks, between oceans, between your pulse and the wheeling of suns. You think you stand on earth, but you are standing in a lattice, a code of stone and fire written for eyes that do not blink and ears that drink silence like wine. Nothing is random. Not the pyramid, not the henge, not the glyph sprawled like a scar on the skin of a desert older than your name, and not you. We speak of networks as if they were born with wires, as if the grid began with circuits glowing in the dark bellies of machines. But the grid is older than copper, older than clay, older than the first hand that learned to clutch fire. It hums beneath the crust of the earth, its filaments knotted in stone, its nodes throbbing under mountains and seas, and it hums in us. Civilizations do not bloom where they please. They sprout like moss along the same invisible lines. Follow the veins of the world and you will find them coiled on the same spine. Egypt crouched on the Nile, its temples drinking the hiss of a lay that ran from pole to pole. The Indus cities throbbing in the hot throat of the east, their ratios echoing the hum of the nodes. The Andes, the Maya, all braided to the same grid like beads on a single thread. Not chance, never chance. The pattern placed them, because the hum bends the flesh, because the current calls the blood, because we are iron and the earth is magnet, and the pull is law. Even the drifts of tribes obey it. We think migration is whim, a hunger, a war, a whisper of gold in the next valley. But step back. See the trails stitched across the continents like veins in a leaf. They curl, they spiral, they knot in the same places the stones stand, as if the people carried in their marrow a compass that twitched to a music they could not hear but could not disobey. And then your life, you think you chose this city, this street, this chair beneath the blind stare of the screen. You think the map of your days sprawls by accident, as random as dust. But look closer. Trace the lines of what brought you here. The parent who met a stranger on a train because the storm stalled the wheels. The job you took because someone else quit. The word that rose in your throat at the one breath, when silence cracked like glass. Do you see the lattice now? How the threads glint, how the nodes flare like embers where choices intersect and burn the shape of a future you thought was yours. This is not fate, as the priests preach a script nailed to the spine of time. Every gesture carved before the womb spat you into light. It is subtler. It is the pull of the net. You may twitch, you may writhe, but the mesh holds. Every struggle only knots you tighter into the pattern that throbs beneath your pulse like a second heart. The cities know. That is why they hum. That is why they clutch us in their grids of glass and wire, their towers rearing like fangs to taste the sky. We built them, yes, but what if they build us? What if the streets are circuits, the plazas nodes, the monuments teeth in a jaw of stone that chews the song of the earth into a syntax and feeds it back into the soft meat of our minds? Sit at the center of a capital when the night has drowned its teeth in neon and listen. Beneath the hiss of tires, beneath the static of voices, you will hear it. The low vibration curling in the marrow of the towers, the hum of a code folding you into its loops. You were placed, not just your body in space, but your name in time. Your hunger's tuned to the pitch of a plan too wide for your skull. You are not the author of your axis. You are the ink on a line scratched across the black page of the absolute. Does that choke you with dread? Or does it blaze like a torch in your chest, the knowing that you are part of a loom so immense it braids suns like beads on a string, and you are one bead, one flicker of fire, and that is enough. The human grid hums, and you hum with it. You are not lost. You are not drifting. You are where the pattern needs you, even if you do not yet know why. We tell ourselves we built the cities, that brick by brick, steel by steel, they rose because we willed them. We think they are monuments to our hunger, our dominion over dust and wind. But what if the truth hums darker? What if the cities built us? Stand at the heart of any capital, tilt your head, watch the towers rake their nails across the sky, their glass ribs sucking the light until it bleeds into jagged shards. Do they feel accidental? Do they feel like whims? Or do they stand like teeth in a jaw, gnashing on a plan too deep for mortar, too old for men? We call them skylines, but they are spines. vertical cords stitching heaven to earth, wired to catch the hum that coils between star and soil. The ancients did the same, only slower. They stacked stones in rings, raised obelisks like frozen spears of dawn. They thought they were worshiping. They were wiring, tuning, lacing their altars into the net that throbs beneath the crust and licks the rim of the sky with tongues of blue. Fire. We still do it, only now the temples wear steel and glass. Now the hymns are grids of neon and fiber optic veins screaming light into the lungs of the dark. We think we map the cities, but what if the cities mapped us first? What if every street, every boulevard, coiled like a serpent through the heart of stone, was drawn by a geometry older than empire, older than iron, older than breath? Look at the plan of Paris. The starburst of avenues radiating from the arc like light from a black sun. Look at Washington, its compass points biting the earth, its monuments aligned to the solstice like teeth in a grin. Look at Manhattan, a grid as rigid as a code scratched on the skin of the island, forcing minds to march in lines, dreams to knot in squares. Architecture is not neutral. It is a script. Every arch is a glyph. Every column a digit in an equation written in stone to solve for control, to solve for resonance. And the temples of glass, they hum louder than the ziggurats. They drink the signals from the sky, beam them through fiber veins, spill them into your skull through screens that stare like blind suns. You call it Wi-Fi. The priests called it prayer. The hum does not care what name you give it. It only cares that you tune. You live inside these codes. You breathe their syntax. Every street bends your motion. Every wall edits your thought. Cities are engines that grind behavior into predictable dust. You think you wander, but the grid writes your steps like lines on a script you will never read. And what of the nodes? The plazas where 10 streets kiss, the towers that spear the clouds like nails pinning the fabric of the sky. Do you feel it when you stand there, that tightening in the lungs, that tremor threading your spine like a wire pulled taut? That is not poetry. That is pressure. That is the current licking your nerves, whispering, move as we move, dream as we dream, sleep where we place you. Some say this is chance, that the architects drew their lines for traffic, for commerce, for beauty. But beauty is the mask the code wears to slip past your guard. Behind the mask is order, and order is always hungry. What does it want? Perhaps only coherence. Perhaps only to mirror the ratios coiled in the black roots of being, to lace our flesh into the same bright lattice that threads the suns like beads on a rosary of flame. Or perhaps something older crouches in that hum, a mind with no face, a will like a magnet bending every nail of our thought toward its dark pole. And the cities are its organs, and we are its blood. Walk through the streets tonight. Let the towers loom like teeth. Feel the hum bleed through the soles of your shoes, curling up your bones like smoke. Look at the lights pulsing in their glass skins. Do they blink for you, or do you blink for them? You are not outside this. You are a syllable in the sentence the skyline speaks. You are a digit in the equation the avenues grind into the flesh of the earth. You were placed, not by kings, not by mayors, but by the quiet code that folds cities like paper flowers and tucks you inside their petals. Every map has a hand. Every line begins with a mind. So if the world hums with pattern, if the grid glows under the crust of chance like veins of molten gold, then the question is not whether it was drawn. The question is, who held the pen? The priests, said God, the architect of architects, spinning spheres on invisible fingers, scribbling galaxies in the margins of eternity. They saw the ratios braided in bone and star and called them divine. and perhaps they were right. But what is a God except a word we throw like a torch into the dark to keep the wolves of unknowing at bay? Others say no one, that the pattern is blind, a byproduct of laws humming in the black marrow of the void. That order is not designed but inevitable, as frost climbs a pane, as lightning forks its veins across the bruise of the storm. But inevitability is just another mask, and behind the mask, something still breathes. The old myths murmur a different name, not God, not law, but the Watchers, the Shining Ones, the architects who walk the young earth in boots of fire, planting stones like seeds, stringing temples on the lay, threads like beads on a rosary of flame. Every continent keeps their ghost. Anunnaki in Sumer, Titans in Greece, Viracocha striding the white spine of the Andes. They taught, they vanished, they left their marks burned in the ribs of the world. Were they gods? Were they men? Or were they something else, a species older than sky, drifting between dimensions like sharks sliding through black water? But here is a thought that tastes of iron. What if the map was drawn by us? Not the us that stumbles now, blinking in the neon glare, but the us that waits at the other end of the spiral, the us braided with light, the us fattened on knowledge we cannot yet name. What if time is not a line but a loop? What if the hand that drew the ratios on Giza's ribs was your own, reaching back through the black river to tug your infant self into the lattice before the wheel spins again? Or darker still, what if there is no hand, only code? What if the world is not a stage, but a simulation? Its mountains, polygons, its oceans, shaders, its hum, the murmur of servers chewing through infinity in the dark throat of a machine. If so, then the map was not drawn. It was rendered. And you are a script, a cluster of commands blinking in a sandbox of light, thinking yourself free because the algorithm is kind enough to give you that dream. Which truth glares harder? That the pattern is the breath of God? That it is the spoor of aliens stalking the long corridors of time? That it is the fingerprint of our own future hand pressed on the clay of the past? Or that it is the static hum of code grinding on a processor older than stars? Perhaps it does not matter, because the map is drawn, and you are on it. You were inked into the weave before your lungs first tasted the knife of air. Every street you walked, every face you kissed, every word that blistered your tongue, all plotted like constellations on a chart you will never hold. You think you wander, but you orbit. You swing in arcs you cannot see, around a center that chews the compass of your will into dust. Do you hate that? Do you want to claw the net, tear the map, scream that you are more than a bead on a thread? The map does not care. The grid hums on, its filaments taut as the strings of a harp no ear can hear. And the hand, whether bone, whether code, whether crowned in light, turns the wheel again. But here is the last riddle. If you could step outside the weave, if you could unscroll the chart and see every node, every pulse of cause and echo, would you change it? Would you sever the thread? Or would you kneel, breath raw in your throat, and whisper, "So this is the music I was meant to be"? Stop. Feel the floor under your feet, the quiet hum threading the marrow of your bones, the gravity that cups you like a hand you never see. You are here, not there, not anywhere else in the infinite spread of could-have-beens. Here, and that matters. We spend our lives wrestling ghosts, the ghosts of choices unmade, roads unsunk in the dark river of time. We haunt ourselves with the gospel of if. If I had turned left, if I had spoken, if I had stayed. But the pattern laughs at if. because the thread never splits. It curves, it coils, but it does not fray. Every knot in your life, the heartbreak that seared your ribs, the door that slammed like a verdict in the night, the hand that dragged you gasping from the brink, each was a bead strung on a wire humming toward this single point, the place you are. Do you think it is small? A chair, a room, a flicker of blue light licking your skin in the midnight hush. But zoom out, pull the lens until the map of you sprawls from birth to now like a river, veining the plain. See how every bend mirrors a bend in the grid, how every detour was a curve drawn to avoid a rift you never knew gaped at your feet. See how the hum tugged you through storms, through silences, through the blind labyrinth of chance that was never chance. You were placed, and the place is not random. It is a node, a stitch in the loom, a fret on the neck of an instrument older than suns, where your note hums in the chord of the real. What chord? What song? You cannot hear it whole. You hear the scrape of one bow on one string and call it life. But behind that thin cry, a symphony riots in the dark, a flood of sound braiding galaxies to ghosts, stones to stars, you to the you that waits beyond the black lip of time. The question is not why here. The question is, what will you do with here? The map placed you, yes, but the breath in your lungs is still fire. And fire shapes. It carves shadows. It hurls sparks across the void. You cannot unspin the thread, but you can choose how it burns. The pattern does not ask for obedience. It asks for awareness, to see the net, to feel its silk cut your skin, and still say, I am not a fly. I am the spider dreaming of stars. Maybe that is the secret, not to tear the web, not to bow to it, but to move in rhythm with its hum until your motion writes a harmony the code did not predict, not rebellion, not surrender. A third thing, the dancer and the dance folding into one spiral of light spun so bright the loom itself shivers. Step outside, look at the sky, the same sky that watched the stones rise at Giza, that poured frost into the bones of Stonehenge, that blistered the backs of men who carved their prayers into the pillars of Göbekli Tepe. They stood where you stand placed, burning with the same hunger, to know why, to know who, to know if the thread was leash or ladder. They did not find the answer. Neither will you, because the answer is not a word. It is a place, and that place is here. So breathe. Feel the weight of your body sinking into the axis of now, the pulse under your tongue, the low murmur of blood in the black shell of your skull. This is the center. This is the hinge. This is the still point of the turning world, and you are nailed to it with pins of light. You are not lost. You are not late. You are the point the pattern leaned toward for 1,000 years, the cusp where its lines knot and flare like veins in a leaf of fire. The place you are is not an accident. It is a sentence, and you are the last word. And when you leave this room, when you tilt your face to the wind and feel the night hum like a black harp under your skin, remember, you were placed, and the one who placed you, whether God, whether code, whether the echo of your own hand reaching backward through time, whispers only this: burn bright where I set you, and do not break the thread.